Welcome back to my channel one more time. JD Vance has always cared only about himself and his ambition above everything else. Even when that comes into conflict with Donald Trump, these days we have policy issues, and I will explain to you how that is panning out with his dear leader Donald Trump, especially when it comes to the conflict, with Donald Trump, what he wants and what JD Vance wants, and that is what we are seeing today: a huge conflict, a huge fight, clash, cold treatment. Vance breaking with, and very publicly, he is now abandoning Donald Trump as the MAGA. As we know, the civil war continues to boil over. But before we get into how Vance is publicly abandoning Donald Trump, I actually want to share with you some other video clips to introduce you to some other issues, some other Republicans, how they are seeing this whole thing. And especially in regards to Venezuela, that can best be described by a very disgruntled Republican, and I'm going to be playing a video of Don Bacon, who had this to say. Take a listen.
The White House just reiterated that U.S. military action to acquire Greenland is not off the table. Have you talked to anybody in the White House, President Trump, Secretary of State Rubio, or anyone else in the administration about this?
Well, not since Miller's comment yesterday, but I hope Republicans stand up against this, universally oppose and give the feedback to the president, because this is appalling. Greenland is a NATO ally. We have a base on Greenland. We could put 4 or 5 bases on Greenland. They wouldn't mind that. They would make agreements with us on mining. Wow. Denmark is one of our best friends. They had more people per capita die in Afghanistan and Iraq fighting for us in Iraq and Afghanistan. So they're a proven ally. So the way we're treating them is really demeaning, and it has no upside. All it does is making our NATO allies angry. It's creating distrust, and there is no upside to it, and we're not going to acquire Greenland. I know most people in Greenland want to remain independent Greenland, with Denmark providing some protection, and they count on us. We're NATO allies. We have bases there, and we can build on that. So this is one of the silliest things I have heard come out of the White House in the last year, and it's unacceptable, and I hope other Republicans line up behind me and make it clear to the White House it's wrong.
So that's pretty much a war going on within MAGA. One party saying we have to go after Venezuela, and then we will go to Greenland and other places, Colombia and the rest of the world. But at the same time, you have other groups in MAGA who are now coalescing on this agenda that no, we cannot attack our NATO allies because that will create quote-unquote mistrust.
Trying to sow distrust and division amongst the president and his team. Let me just be very clear. The vice president has been involved in all policy. He is the right-hand man of the president on all policy matters, including Venezuela policy. He was, of course, read in and deeply involved in this operation from the very beginning. And he was present on the night of the operation via secure communication at a different location as to not damage the operational secrecy of this mission that was so incredibly important to ensure that this mission could be carried out successfully without endangering our troops.
So according to Caroline Levitt, everything is just cool, everything is just going as planned, and in fact the administration is working much more effectively than it had been before, especially when it comes to JD Vance and Donald Trump. But Jack Leah, I think his name, he said something very, very different. Take a listen.
Twisting his arm, analyst reveals Vance paying to support Trump's Venezuela raid. One of the Trump administration's best policy salespeople, well, that's not true, has been relatively quiet in the debate over the recent arrest of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, and one analyst thinks it's because people are having to twist his arm behind the scenes. Vice President J.D. Vance, whom New Yorker contributor Benjamin Wallace-Wells argued in a new article on Tuesday is the ablest communicator in the president's orbit, has been relatively absent from the media sphere since Maduro was arrested over the weekend. Yep. Vance did put out a rather milquetoast statement for his standards, according to Wallace-Wells, but hasn't been the forceful advocate that he typically is. I understand the anxiety over the use of military force, but are we just supposed to allow a communist to steal our stuff in our hemisphere and do nothing? Vance's statement read in part, Wallace Wells said Vance sounded pained in his defense. The vice president seemed pained, like someone was twisting his arm, he argued. His statements also didn't add up to a case for war or anything like it. Vance's hesitation might stem from his military background and his anti-interventionist ideology. Beyond that, Wallace Wells added that Venezuela might be a particular mess that Vance, who stands to inherit Trump's MAGA movement, can't sell. If Trump means to persuade the American people of the wisdom,
everything Donald Trump will do in his tenure will have consequences for J.D. Vance's administration if he does get elected next time. Therefore, J.D. Vance is playing it cool and smart, not trying to take any liability or inherit any mess from Donald Trump's administration.